Echo of a forgotten species. The evacuation alarms wailed across Haven Station as the Meridian Alliance's final stronghold prepared for its end. Lieutenant Krev T. Seri stood at the command center viewport, watching as the Shroud Collective's warships emerged from the darkness like nightmares made manifest. Their obsidian hulls absorbed rather than reflected light, making them appear as mobile voids against the star-speckled canvas of space. Final defensive perimeter has been breached, the tactical officer announced, his voice flat with resignation. Civilian evacuation at 63%. We cannot hold much longer. Kriv's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a nervous habit from childhood that resurfaced in moments of extreme stress. The crystalline ridges along his blue-scaled forearms glowed faintly, another involuntary response to his mounting anxiety. For 6 decades, the Meridian Alliance had fought against the Shroud Collective's expansion. Now, after losing 28 systems and billions of lives, they were down to their last refuge. Status of the archives? Krev asked, turning to Science Officer Neela. 98% purged as ordered, Neela replied. Her tentacles twisted anxiously around her datapad. Critical historical data and cultural records have been loaded onto escape vessels. Krev nodded and stepped away from the viewport. I need access to Vault 0. Now. Neela's bioluminescent spots flashed in alarm. Lieutenant, those are restricted pre-alliance records. The Council ordered them destroyed. Not. The Council is dead, Krev interrupted. And if we don't try something extraordinary, we'll join them within hours. Access codes, please. After a moment's hesitation, Neela pressed her tentacle against her authentication panel. Vault 0 access granted to your personal terminal. Whatever you're looking for, I hope it's worth the treason charge we would face if we survived this. Krev didn't respond as he hurried to his station. His fingers flew across the holographic interface, navigating through layers of classified archives until he reached what he sought. Records dating back nearly 3 centuries to the early formation of interstellar society in this galactic arm. There, buried under security protocols and cryptic nomenclature, was what he needed, the file simply labeled Earth. As a military historian, Krev had encountered whispers, legends really, about the species called humans. They were absent from official alliance records, but stories persisted among the older races. Humans had appeared suddenly on the galactic stage, advanced with shocking speed, and then, just as suddenly, vanished after a brief but spectacular period of expansion. Some said they had ascended to a higher plane of existence. Others claimed they had destroyed themselves in civil war. The most common belief was that they had simply retreated to their home system, erecting impenetrable defensive systems and cutting all contact with the younger races they had briefly interacted with. What all the stories agreed on was that humans had been formidable beyond reasoning. Not the strongest, fastest, or longest-lived species, but terrifying in their adaptability, ingenuity, and resolute determination. They were problem-solvers who treated the impossible as merely inconvenient. And now, as the Meridian Alliance faced extinction, Krev believed they might be the only hope left. The file contained coordinates, protocols, and most importantly, an emergency quantum beacon frequency. According to the notes, this channel had been established as a last resort communication method should catastrophe threaten the young alliance that humans had helped establish before their withdrawal. That alliance had evolved into the modern Meridian Alliance, though the connection to human influence had been deliberately obscured over time. The ruling council had apparently feared becoming dependent on human protection, or perhaps they feared the humans themselves. Commander, Krev called out, I need authorization to activate an ancient communications protocol. Commander Valen, a veteran warrior whose scaled face bore the ritual scars of 50 battles, looked up from the tactical display. We have 18 warships closing on our position, Lieutenant. Is your protocol going to stop them? No, sir, but it might bring someone who can. Valen's expression didn't change, but his tail, usually held rigidly as military discipline demanded, twitched slightly. Explain. I believe I can contact the humans. A heavy silence fell across the command center. Even those unfamiliar with the classified records had heard the myths. A junior officer laughed nervously before catching herself. "Lieutenant," Valen said slowly, "if you are referring to Earth humans, they haven't been seen in nearly 3 centuries. We don't even know if they still exist." "The Shroud Collective exists," Krev countered. "And in 10 hours, we won't. What do we have to lose?" Commander Valen stared at him for a long moment, then nodded once. "Do it, but maintain operational security. This is between you, me, and Officer Neela." Krev returned to his station and prepared the quantum beacon. The technology was ancient by modern standards, but the principles were sound. If humans still monitored this frequency, a very big if, the message would reach them instantly, regardless of distance. He composed the message carefully. "This is Lieutenant Krev Tseri of the Meridian Alliance. Our civilization faces extinction at the hands of the Shroud Collective. If humanity still exists, if the old pacts still hold meaning, we request immediate intervention. Haven Station, coordinates attached, falls within 6 hours. We have no other recourse." Krev transmitted the message, then waited, counting his heartbeats in the silence that followed. 1, 2, 3, 60, 61. "Lieutenant, I'm detecting unusual energy readings," Neela suddenly announced, her voice tight with confusion. "Something is interfacing with our quantum network." The main display flickered, and for a moment, Krev thought the Shroud had begun their cyber attack. Then the screen stabilized, showing only a simple audio waveform against a black background. "This is Commander Elena Reyes, Earth Defense Force," came a clear, controlled voice that sent shivers down Krev's spine. "Authentication protocols accepted. Message received and verified." Krev found himself unable to speak. It had worked. After centuries of silence, a human had answered. Commander Valen stepped forward. "Commander Reyes, this is Commander Valen of Haven Station. Our situation is desperate. The Shroud Collective has overwhelmed our defenses. We have thousands of civilians still attempting evacuation." There was a brief pause before Commander Reyes responded. "We have been monitoring the Shroud's expansion for some time, Commander. Earth has maintained a policy of non-intervention, but your activation of the emergency protocol has triggered certain contingencies." "Does that mean you'll help us?" Krev asked, unable to contain himself. "It means we're coming," Reyes replied simply. "I need you to hold your position for 8 hours. Can you do that?" Valen and Krev exchanged glances. 8 hours seemed impossible with their current resources. "We will try," Valen answered honestly. "Not good enough," Reyes said, her tone hardening. "I need those civilians protected until we arrive. I'm transmitting technical specifications to your systems now. Apply these modifications to your shield generators. It should buy you the time you need." Data began streaming across their terminals, schematics unlike anything Krev had ever seen, elegant in their simplicity yet so advanced that their engineering team initially thought they were looking at theoretical models rather than actionable plans. These modifications would increase shield efficiency by 300%. Neela whispered, her eyes wide as she analyzed the incoming data. "But our power grid can't possibly sustain." "Yes, it can," interrupted an engineering officer who was rapidly scrolling through the transmitted specifications. "If we implement this power cycling algorithm, it's brilliant. Unconventional, but brilliant." For the first time in months, Krev felt something dangerous bloom in his chest. "Hope." "We'll hold, Commander Reyes," Valen said with newfound confidence. "But what exactly should we expect when you arrive? What capabilities can you bring against the Shroud?" There was a pause, and when Reyes spoke again, Krev could almost hear the smile in her voice. "Let's just say that the Shroud is about to learn why most species evolve past the need to cast shadows, Commander. Stand firm. Humanity remembers its friends." The communication ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Then, with an efficiency born of desperate circumstances, they began implementing the modifications transmitted by Commander Reyes. As engineering teams raced to reconfigure Haven Station's defenses according to the human specifications, Krev returned to his historical archives, searching for any additional information about human warfare. What he found both terrified and exhilarated him. The fragmented records spoke of conflicts resolved not through attrition or overwhelming force, but through speed, precision, and psychological impact. Humans didn't simply defeat their enemies. They broke their will to continue fighting. 6 hours later, as Haven Station's enhanced shields repelled bombardment that should have shattered them instantly, the Shroud Collective's command ship transmitted a message. This delay is pointless. Your hope is misplaced. Surrender now, and we will allow your civilians safe passage. Commander Valen looked to Krev, who checked the chronometer. 2 more hours until the humans arrive, he whispered. Valen nodded and opened a channel to the Shroud command ship. We decline your generous offer, he responded formally. But I suggest you prepare yourselves. You're about to have company. On the tactical display, the Shroud warships continued their methodical approach, entirely unaware that they were no longer the most dangerous predators in the system. Their victory celebration was premature. Humanity was coming, and the galaxy was about to remember why that mattered. When humans come knocking. High Commander Vexthor stood on the bridge of the Shroud Collective's flagship, the inevitable darkness, watching with satisfaction as his fleet surrounded Haven Station. The station's shields were proving unexpectedly resilient, but that merely delayed the inevitable. Victory was assured. It was just a matter of time. Begin the celebration transmissions, Vexthor ordered, his voice a gravelly rumble through his breathing apparatus. The Shroud species had evolved in the toxic atmosphere of a dying world. Their bodies adapted to environments that would kill most sentient life. They viewed this biological advantage as proof of their superiority and destiny to rule. Send word to the Ascendancy. Tell them the Meridian Alliance has fallen. The purification of this sector can begin as scheduled. His second-in-command, Sub-Commander Dren, executed the order with practiced efficiency. Throughout the fleet, victory messages propagated. The long campaign was ending. The Shroud Collective had eliminated their final significant opposition in this galactic arm. High Commander called a sensor officer, her voice cutting through the celebratory atmosphere. We're detecting unusual gravitational fluctuations at the system's edge. Vexthor turned his attention to the main display. Meridian reinforcements, he asked, though he knew there were none left to deploy. Unknown configurations, sir. The signatures don't match any known Meridian technology. Before Vexthor could respond, space itself seemed to fold at multiple points around the system's perimeter. Where there had been empty void moments before, 7 vessels now existed. They hadn't dropped out of FTL travel with the usual energy signature. They had simply appeared. The ships were smooth and pearlescent, their hulls reflecting the surrounding starlight while somehow absorbing sensor scans. They weren't particularly large, each roughly 1/4 the size of the inevitable darkness, but something about their presence triggered an instinctual unease among the Shroud Bridge crew. Hail them, Vexthor ordered, keeping his voice steady despite his discomfort. Before the communications officer could comply, all Shroud systems simultaneously received a transmission. It bypassed their encryption, overrode their security protocols, and appeared on every display throughout the fleet. A human female with olive skin and close-cropped dark hair looked out at them from the screens. Her uniform was simple, a fitted gray suit with minimal insignia, but her posture conveyed absolute authority. This is Commander Elena Reyes of the Earth Defense Force. You are engaged in hostile actions against protected allies of humanity. You will power down your weapon systems, withdraw to a minimum safe distance of 1 light minute, and prepare to receive terms of surrender. Stunned silence fell over the Shroud command bridge, followed by incredulous laughter. The humans, if these truly were the legendary humans, and not some species falsely claiming their identity, had sent 7 ships against a fleet of 34 capital vessels and over 100 support craft. "Engage long-range weaponry," Vexthor ordered calmly. "Let's see how these humans respond to proper firepower." 20 Shroud warships oriented toward the human vessels and fired their main batteries, lances of superheated plasma designed to overwhelm shields and vaporize hull material. The energy output was sufficient to destroy a small moon. The beams reached their targets and passed through them as if the ships weren't there. "Holograms," Drin suggested, before the tactical officer interrupted. "New contacts. They're inside our formation." Impossible, Vexthor thought. But the sensor data didn't lie. The 7 human vessels had somehow relocated instantaneously, now positioned within the Shroud fleet's defensive perimeter. Before he could issue new orders, the humans launched their counterattack. It wasn't weapons fire in any conventional sense. Rather, waves of coherent energy pulsed outward from each human ship, washing over the Shroud vessels. Where the energy touched, systems failed. Weapons went offline. Engines powered down. Communication ceased. One by one, Shroud ships drifted helplessly in space, rendered as threatening as stones. "What is happening?" Vexthor demanded, slamming his fist against the command console. "How are they doing this?" "Unknown, High Commander," the science officer replied, frantically analyzing the limited data they were receiving. "It appears to be some form of targeted electromagnetic pulse, but it's selectively disabling only offensive systems, while leaving life support intact." Vexthor stared at the tactical display in disbelief as his mighty fleet was neutralized without a single casualty on either side. This was not warfare as the Shroud understood it. This was humiliation. On Haven Station, Krev watched the human intervention with equal parts awe and scientific fascination. The command center had fallen silent, all eyes fixed on the tactical display, showing the Shroud fleet's systematic incapacitation. "They're not destroying them," Neela whispered. "They're just stopping them." Commander Valen nodded slowly. "Because they can. This isn't a battle. It's a statement." The station's sensors could barely track the human vessels as they moved with impossible agility through the Shroud formation. One human ship approached Haven Station, and a communication request pinged their systems. Commander Reyes appeared on screen again. "Commander Valen, Lieutenant Tisseri, your station is secure. We'll be docking to coordinate next steps and to provide medical assistance for your wounded." "Thank you, Commander," Valen replied, struggling to find adequate words. "Your intervention is beyond what we could have hoped for." A slight smile crossed Raya's face. "We keep our promises, Commander. Always have." 30 minutes later, Krev stood nervously in Haven Station's main docking bay as the airlock cycled open. A delegation of 6 humans entered, 5 in the same gray uniforms as Commander Reyes, and 1 in what appeared to be a more formal diplomatic attire. Reyes stepped forward first, and Krev was struck by how ordinary she appeared. Humans weren't physically imposing by galactic standards, bipedal endoskeletal omnivores of average height and strength. Yet they had just neutralized the most feared military force in the sector without apparent effort. "Lieutenant Tisseri," Reyes said, extending her hand in what Krev recognized from his research as a traditional human greeting gesture. "Thank you for remembering us after all this time." Krev carefully took her hand, marveling at the warmth of her skin against his scales. "Commander Reyes, I must admit I wasn't certain the beacon would reach anyone, let alone receive a response." "We've been watching," she replied simply. "Earth may have stepped back from galactic politics, but we never stopped paying attention." The human in diplomatic attire stepped forward. "I am Ambassador Chen. While Commander Reyes handles the immediate tactical situation, I am authorized to discuss longer-term arrangements with your leadership." Commander Valen bowed slightly. "We are grateful for any assistance Earth is willing to provide, Ambassador. But I must ask, why now? The Shroud Collective has been expanding for decades, consuming worlds and subjugating species. Why respond to our specific call for help? Chen and Rice exchanged a glance before the ambassador answered. The original compact that humanity made with the founding species of what would become your alliance included an emergency provision. If the beacon was ever activated, it meant one of our oldest friends faced extinction. That merited breaking our isolation. And the shroud? Krev asked. What will happen to them? Commander Rice's expression hardened slightly. They've been offered terms. Non-negotiable ones. Their leadership must stand down, withdraw from occupied territories, and submit to diplomatic oversight. If they refuse, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. And if they agree? Mila asked, her voice small. Then they'll find humanity can be quite reasonable, Ambassador Chen said with a diplomatic smile. We have no interest in punishment for its own sake, only in restoration of balance. Within hours, the situation had transformed completely. Human medical teams provided advanced treatment to wounded Alliance personnel. Their engineers helped restore damaged systems using technology that seemed to operate on principles the Alliance's best scientists could barely comprehend. And aboard the inevitable darkness, High Commander Vex Thor faced the most difficult decision of his life. You cannot seriously be considering surrender, Sub-Commander Dren hissed. There are only 7 of their ships. 7 ships that disabled our entire fleet without taking a single casualty, Vex Thor countered. 7 ships that appeared inside our formation, bypassing every defense we have. He stared at the terms the humans had transmitted. They were surprisingly lenient, given the circumstances. The Shroud would withdraw from Meridian territories, release all captured worlds, and submit to a century-long oversight program. But they would retain their sovereignty and their homeworlds. The Ascendancy will never agree, Dren insisted. The Ascendancy isn't here, Vex Thor replied. And if we refuse these terms, I suspect there won't be an Ascendancy to return to. He activated the communication channel. Commander Rice's face appeared on screen, patient and implacable. We accept your terms, Vex Thor said formally. Rice nodded once. A wise decision, High Commander. Ambassador Chen will coordinate the details of your withdrawal. Your fleet's systems will be gradually restored as you comply with the established checkpoints. And what assurance do we have that humanity will honor these terms once we are vulnerable? Vex Thor asked. The same assurance we gave the galaxy 3 centuries ago, before we withdrew, Rice replied. Humanity keeps its word, Commander, always. That is our strength and our burden. The communication ended, and Vex Thor turned to his stunned officers. Begin preparations for withdrawal. The war is over. 3 days later, as the Shroud fleet departed the Haven system under human escort, Krev found himself in a quiet observation lounge with Commander Rice. They watched the ships diminish into the distance, 2 predator species now locked in an uneasy peace. Will you stay? Krev asked finally. Now that humanity has returned to the galactic stage. Rice considered the question. Not in the way you might expect. We've evolved during our isolation, Lieutenant. Developed technologies and philosophies that might be disruptive if widely shared. You're afraid of influencing our development, Krev realized. Just as you were centuries ago. We learned hard lessons about unintended consequences, she admitted, but we'll maintain a presence. Establish embassies, open limited trade and cultural exchange. She turned to face him fully. Humanity withdrew because we saw the path we were on, becoming the dominant force that shaped galactic development. We didn't want that responsibility. We still don't, but we also can't ignore our oldest friends when they're in need. Krev nodded slowly, understanding the complexity of the position. And the emergency beacon, will it still function if we need you again? Rice smiled. It never stopped functioning, Lieutenant. We just needed someone brave enough to use it. As Rice departed to rejoin her ship, Krev remained at the viewport, watching the stars. The galaxy had changed irrevocably in just a few days. The Shroud Collective's seemingly unstoppable advance had been halted not through destruction, but through the sheer force of humanity's technological superiority and their willingness to act decisively. The legends had been right after all. Humans weren't the strongest or fastest species. They didn't need to be. They simply solved problems that others considered unsolvable, and they did it with a pragmatic efficiency that was terrifying and awe-inspiring in equal measure. On the command deck of Haven Station, Alliance leaders were already beginning discussions about rebuilding, about re-establishing contact with isolated colonies, about the future that had nearly been stolen from them. A future that now, thanks to humanity's return, seemed limitless with possibility. The enemies had been celebrating victory until someone remembered to call a human. Now, the celebration belonged to those who had dared to hope, even at the edge of extinction. And somewhere distant, on a blue world that had chosen isolation rather than domination, humanity was remembering what it meant to be part of something larger than itself once again.